The numbers didn't even feel real at first. I checked them 3 times, then again, just to be sure. Each one lined up perfectly. Every single digit matched the ticket clutched in my hand, $12 million. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at that tiny slip of paper like it had just spoken to me. I couldn't scream. I couldn't cry. My body was too stunned to feel anything. $12 million. The first person I called wasn't my boyfriend, wasn't a lawyer, wasn't a financial advisor. It was Serena, my sister. I don't even know why. Maybe I just needed to say it out loud to someone who had always been part of my life. Maybe I thought, for once, she'd be proud of me. She picked up on the second ring. Serena said, "You sound weird. What's going on?" I said, "I need you to promise you won't tell anyone." Serena said, "God, what is it? Are you pregnant? Did you commit a crime?" I said, "No. I think I won the lottery." Dead silence. Then Serena said, "Wait, what?" I repeated it, this time slower, quieter, like I was afraid saying it too loud would break the magic. I said, "I think I just won $12 million. Serena said, "You're joking." I said, "I'm not." A pause. Then an explosion of sound, laughter, disbelief, excitement. Serena said, "Holy, are you serious? Oh my God, what? Are you kidding me? You really bought a ticket?" I said, "Yeah, just one." It was a joke, kind of. Serena said, "And you actually won?" I said, "I checked 5 times. She screamed. Actually screamed. Then lowered her voice like she didn't want someone near her to hear. Serena said, "You're going to change your whole life. This is insane. You cannot tell anyone, okay? Especially not yet. People will swarm you. Be smart about this." I said, "I know. That's why I told you first. Please, don't say anything. Not even to Brandon." Serena said, "Of course not. Are you kidding? No one. This is your story." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. That night, I hid the ticket under the lining of my jewelry box, taped it carefully, sealed it, and set the whole thing inside my locked dresser drawer. I knew I needed to claim it properly. I was researching attorneys, financial advisors, figuring out how to move smart. But the next morning, something felt off. I woke up to 3 missed calls from Serena. I had a weird feeling in my stomach. Then Brandon texted me. "Heard you're finally catching a break. Nice." I stared at it for a full minute. I hadn't told Brandon anything. He didn't even like me that much. He tolerated me, barely. So where was this coming from? I didn't respond. But I knew. I ran to my dresser, pulled open the drawer, yanked out the box. The tape had been cut. The ticket was gone. I sat on the floor, shaking. My mouth dry, my entire body cold and hot at once. Gone. I didn't panic right away. I wanted to believe there was another explanation, that I had misplaced it, that maybe it fell behind the drawer, but it hadn't. I knew where I'd put it. I remembered every second. I called Serena. She picked up sounding groggy. Serena said, "Hey, what's going on?" I said, "The ticket is gone." She paused. Serena said, "What?" I said, "The ticket. The one I told you about. It's missing." Serena said, "Well, are you sure?" "Maybe you just—" I cut her off. I said, "No. I know where I put it. It's gone." Silence. I said, "Did you tell Brandon?" Her voice sharpened instantly. Serena said, "What?" "Number, why would I? You told me not to." I said, "Because he texted me this morning. Something weird. And you called me 3 times overnight. Why?" Serena said, "Because I was excited for you. I was thinking of things you could do with the money. Jesus, you're being paranoid." I didn't respond. She exhaled sharply. Serena said, Look, if you lost it, that sucks, but don't go accusing people. I said, I didn't lose it. Serena said, well, I sure as hell didn't steal it. And neither did Brandon. Her voice was getting louder, defensive. Serena said, you're being dramatic, again, like always. You get emotional and immediately think the worst of people. I said, because someone took it, Serena. I told you and no one else, and now it's gone. Serena said, and you think I just ran to Brandon and he magically broke into your apartment? I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure how. I just knew what I felt. Serena said, you're out of control. You need to calm down before you ruin something that hasn't even started. That last line rang in my ears. Before I ruined something. As if I hadn't already been robbed. I hung up without saying anything else. A few hours later, I got a group text from my parents. Mom, we heard what happened. Serena said you're really upset. Maybe talk to someone before making accusations. Dad, Brandon's a good guy. You've never liked him, and that's fine, but don't turn this into a war. They didn't ask if I was okay. Didn't ask for my side. I texted back, I'm not making this up. No one replied. That night, Brandon posted a story on Instagram. A drink. A Rolex box in the corner. Subtle. Mocking. I saw Serena's profile comment with 3 fire emojis. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. They didn't believe me. No one did. Except Ryan. But I'll tell you about him later. Because this was just the beginning. There's a reason no one believed me. It wasn't just the missing ticket. It wasn't even Brandon's smug denial or Serena's wide-eyed innocence. It was history. The kind of history that grows in a family like roots underground. Unseen but unmovable. Serena has always been the favorite. And me? I've always been the joke. Growing up, Serena could do no wrong, literally. If she stayed out late, my mother said, she's just popular. If I stayed out, I was reckless. If she rolled her eyes at Dad, he chuckled. When I did it, he snapped, watch your attitude. At 10 years old, Serena accidentally broke my favorite porcelain doll. She told my parents I had left it out in the hallway, even though it was on the shelf. My mother said, you need to take better care of your things. When I cried, my father said, you're too sensitive. Stop blaming your sister for everything. By 12, Serena was modeling for local boutiques. I was struggling through early puberty with a face full of acne and a mouth that asked too many questions. People called her graceful. People called me difficult. At 16, when Serena lied about being at her friend's house and went to a party instead, guess who covered for her? Me. I lied to my parents, said she was at the movies with me. I even backed up her story when she came home drunk. But 3 weeks later, when I missed curfew by 20 minutes because my tire blew out on a dark road, I got grounded for a month. My mother said, Serena never pulls stunts like this. And Serena? She just smiled from the top of the stairs like the queen of quiet revenge. I learned early that my word meant less than hers, that no matter how hard I tried, how honest I was, how small I made myself to avoid conflict, I was still seen as the problem, the moody one, the jealous one, the one who can't just be happy for her sister. Even when Serena started dating Brandon, I could feel the way everyone leaned into the fantasy. My parents were obsessed with him. My dad called him a real man. My mom said, he's going places just like Serena. You could learn something. Learn what exactly? How to fake kindness until you get what you want? When Serena and Brandon got engaged, the family acted like royalty had entered the bloodline. They printed invitations with gold foil. My mom cried when she saw Serena in her dress. And me? I sat at the edge of every room like a ghost, present, but unimportant. So when the lottery ticket disappeared, after I told only Serena, I already knew how this would play out. I would be the liar. Brandon would be the victim. And Serena? She'd be the poor sister caught in the middle of another one of my episodes. That's what my dad called it, by the way. When I confronted them and got emotional, he said, "You're having one of your episodes again." Like I was unstable, hysterical. Like a woman with reason to be angry must be mentally unwell. I said, "You really think I'd invent a $12 million lottery win just to start drama?" My mother didn't look up from her tea. She said, "We just don't want you to spiral, honey." Spiral. That word stung more than any of Brandon's smug little smirks or Serena's wounded act. Because it meant they didn't see me as a liar. They saw me as broken. As the problem child, grown up and still difficult. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw every insult and unfair memory back in their faces. But I didn't. Because I'd done that before, and it never worked. They always closed ranks around Serena, even when she was wrong, even when she lied. I remember one summer when I was 19 and Serena borrowed my car. She scratched the side mirror and dented the passenger door. She told Dad it had already been like that. I confronted her. She denied it flatly. When I insisted, she rolled her eyes and said, "You're being dramatic again." And Dad? He believed her. I paid for the repair myself. No one apologized. No one ever does. So yeah, when they all chose to believe Brandon over me, it wasn't a surprise. It was just the latest chapter in a story I already knew by heart. But this time, something felt different. Because this time, I wasn't 12 or 16 or even 19. I wasn't trying to prove myself anymore. This time, I had something they couldn't touch. Truth. And Ryan. He hadn't said much yet, not to the family, not even to me. But every time I walked through the door looking defeated, his eyes met mine with this quiet, steady certainty, like I wasn't crazy, like I was worth believing, like I wasn't alone. That was new, because I had spent most of my life trying to be small enough to avoid being called too much. And here was this man, calm as a glacier, who looked at me like I was just right. But I'll get to him soon. For now, I just want to be honest about what it felt like, watching my sister pretend to be heartbroken that I accused her fiancé, watching my mother shake her head like I disappointed her again, watching Brandon smirk like the villain in a cheap movie who thinks the camera will never catch him. I've been called jealous before, but this wasn't jealousy, this was betrayal, and this time, I was done being the joke. I've been called a lot of things in my life, jealous, dramatic, too emotional, hard to love, but Ryan never used any of those words. Not once. After the confrontation with Serena and Brandon, after the silence from my parents, after the texts stopped coming in from family members who once said they always had my back, I came home and collapsed onto the couch. I didn't cry. I just stared at the ceiling like I was trying to see a reason. Ryan didn't push. He didn't ask what happened right away. He just brought me tea and sat on the arm of the couch, his hand resting on my shoulder like an anchor. After a while, he said, "You want to talk about it?" I told him everything. Every detail. How I told Serena in confidence, how Brandon started acting weird, how the ticket vanished, how they both denied everything, and how my parents looked at me like I was unstable. When I finished, I said, "Do you think I sound crazy?" Ryan didn't flinch. He just said, "No. I think you sound betrayed." That one sentence was enough to break something loose inside me. I didn't cry, but my hands started shaking. I said, "Everyone thinks I'm making it up. That I'm just bitter." Ryan said, That's what people say when they're protecting someone they like more than they trust. I looked at him. He was so calm, not angry, not shocked, just focused. I said, "What if I can't prove it? What if the ticket's gone and they spend the money and no one ever believes me?" Ryan said, "Let me ask you something. Did you tell anyone else about the win?" I said, "No. Just Serena." Ryan said, "And you were careful where you kept the ticket?" I nodded. Ryan said, "Okay. Then it's not about what if, it's about how we find out what happened." I blinked. I said, "We?" Ryan just gave the smallest smile and said, "You think I'm going to let some smug little amateur rob my girl and get away with it?" That was Ryan, never loud, never performative, but when he said something, you felt it like steel under velvet. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't make a big scene, he just started. First he asked questions, detailed ones, where exactly I had stored the ticket, who had keys to my apartment, whether Serena had ever visited alone, what time Brandon messaged me, the exact wording of that message. He jotted things down in a notebook like he was back on a mission. I said, "You really think you can track this?" Ryan said, "Brandon's not that smart. He's arrogant. Guys like that always leave a trail." A few days later, we were invited to a family barbecue at my parents' house. Serena would be there. Brandon too. Ryan and I almost didn't go, but he insisted. Ryan said, "Let's just watch. Don't react. Just observe." So we went, and it was exactly what I expected. As soon as we stepped into the backyard, Serena was already holding court by the grill, dazzling everyone with some story about her wedding plans. She looked up and gave me a tight-lipped smile. Then she looked at Ryan and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Well, if it isn't our resident bodyguard/detective." Brandon chuckled, standing behind her with a beer in hand. Brandon said, "Hey man, you cracked the case yet? Or still chasing ghosts?" I didn't respond. I just looked at Ryan, waiting for some kind of reaction. But Ryan smiled, calmly, even kindly. Ryan said, "Not yet. But I will. These things take patience." Serena snorted. Serena said, "You really think your ex-military boyfriend can outsmart Brandon?" A few people laughed. My uncle muttered, "Well, maybe he thinks this is like CSI or something." I could feel myself shrinking inside, all the old instincts flaring up, embarrassment, shame, rage. But Ryan didn't blink. He just turned to Serena and said, "No offense, but Brandon isn't exactly hard to outsmart." That shut everyone up for a second. Brandon's jaw clenched. Brandon said, "You got something to say?" Ryan looked at him and said, "Not right now." Just collecting facts. Then he took a bite of a hot dog and walked away like he'd just commented on the weather. Later, as we drove home, I was still buzzing with nerves. I said, "They were all laughing at me." Ryan said, "No, they were laughing because they're scared. People laugh when they don't want to admit they've backed the wrong person." I looked at him. I said, "How can you be so calm?" Ryan said, "Because I've seen worse. And because I've seen men like Brandon before. Confident, cocky, thinks he's untouchable." I said, "And?" Ryan said, "They all make mistakes. Every single one." He reached for my hand. Ryan said, "Let them talk. They're not your judge, and they're not your jury. We'll handle this our way." And that was the moment I realized something. It wasn't just that Ryan believed me. It was that he saw me. He saw past the narrative my family had pinned on me for years, past the chaos, past the noise. He didn't see a mess. He saw a mission. And I trusted him with it. Because sometimes the person who believes you when no one else does is worth more than $12 million. If Brandon thought I was bluffing, he wasn't wrong. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a team of lawyers or some secret investigator. I just had Ryan. And Brandon had no idea who he was dealing with. Ryan didn't talk about his past much. I knew he was a Navy SEAL, knew he'd served overseas, led missions, did things he didn't like to brag about. But he never made it a personality. He didn't need to. He just moved through the world with this quiet precision, like everything was a potential threat he'd already solved in his mind. After the barbecue, he got to work. Ryan said, "We start with movement. Brandon's habits. Spending. Phone calls. People don't steal $12 million and sit still." I said, "But what are we even looking for?" Ryan said, "Cracks. Patterns. Weakness. The arrogance will show." He was right. Brandon wasn't exactly subtle. A few days after the cookout, he posted a photo of himself on a boat. Not a rental. A purchase. I saw the caption, "Hard work pays off." Hard work? He was a mid-tier sales consultant who couldn't keep a job longer than 6 months. The last time we all went out to dinner, Serena paid the bill. Ryan saw the post and said, "Clock started. Let's track everything he touches." He began compiling a timeline, screenshots, timestamps, anything that proved Brandon's lifestyle had changed drastically and suddenly. He tracked credit activity, social media locations, and even photos of receipts Brandon left lying around when he met with mutual friends. Brandon didn't know how to cover his tracks. Ryan said, "He's not laundering. Just spending. That's easier to follow." I said, "How do we link it to the ticket?" Ryan said, "We don't have to link it yet. First, we corner him into admitting it." He was so methodical, so terrifyingly patient. He got access to a friend in private security who ran a check on new accounts opened under Brandon's name. It turned out, Brandon had opened a secondary checking account under a different version of his name, his full middle name included. Brandon T. Riley became Brandon Thomas Riley. And that account, that's where the money went. Money. Ryan leaned back in his chair the night he found it and said, "There it is." I said, "You're sure it's the money?" Ryan said, "It's too clean, too fast, and too quiet." A week later, Brandon was spotted at a luxury car dealership, not buying yet, but asking too many questions. The next day, he made 5 calls to what looked like a prepaid burner number. Ryan said, "He's paranoid now." "That's good. Let's push him." And that's when Ryan laid the trap. He set up a fake email account and created a believable identity. A representative from the state lottery office requesting urgent verification of identity and original ticket claim process. He used real formatting, real headers, even embedded links that led to fake landing pages built in less than an hour. It looked real. Too real. Brandon replied within 2 hours. Brandon's email said, "I already filed everything weeks ago. Why are you contacting me now?" Ryan smiled. Ryan said, "He's sweating. Let's press." He followed up with a phone call, using a voice modulator and a script, asking about his knowledge of lottery fraud penalties and requesting proof of possession. I sat there listening as Brandon's voice cracked on the other end. Brandon said, "This is ridiculous. I already submitted the ticket. I have my deposit confirmation." Ryan said, "Sir, we're not seeing a claim under your official name. We'll need to escalate if this isn't resolved." Brandon said, I went through someone I know. They said it would be cleaner. I didn't know it was a problem." Ryan muted the mic and looked at me. He whispered, "That's it. That's the confession." He clicked record before continuing the conversation, asking for Brandon to confirm dates and transaction amounts. Brandon, still flustered, gave everything. Then Ryan ended the call, saved the file, and leaned back. Ryan said, "We've got him." Cold, I stared at him. I said, That's admissible? Ryan said, not in court yet, but we're not going to court. We're going to war, in the only court that matters to him. The family, I couldn't believe what I was hearing. For weeks, I'd been gaslit, dismissed, painted as the unstable one. And here was the man everyone defended, caught in his own panic. I said, he confessed to fraud, in his own voice. Ryan nodded. Ryan said, and I've got screenshots of all his new purchases. The boat, the ring, the watch. The new condo lease in his alias. It's over. I said, what if they still don't believe me? Ryan said, then they'll have to admit what they are, people who chose comfort over truth. He looked at me carefully, gently. Ryan said, you were never crazy. They just couldn't be bothered to see you clearly. For a long moment, I didn't say anything. Then I whispered, thank you. Ryan said, don't thank me. Just be ready for what comes next. Because this time, I wouldn't be asking for anyone's belief. This time, they were going to watch the truth unfold. With receipts. Serena was the one who called the meeting. She texted me late one night, all formal and clipped, like she was setting up a corporate mediation. Serena said, let's clear the air. Brandon and I are tired of the drama. You can bring Ryan if you want. I read the message twice. Then I looked at Ryan, who was sipping tea at the kitchen table like he already knew it was coming. I said, she wants to talk. Ryan said, good, so do I. The meeting was set for Sunday afternoon. My parents offered to host. The living room was already set up when we arrived. Chairs pulled into a wide circle like we were about to stage an intervention. Except I wasn't the addict this time. Brandon was already there, legs spread, one arm slung over the back of the couch like he owned the place. Serena stood behind him, arms crossed, like some prosecutor ready to present her airtight case. My mom greeted me with forced cheer. My dad didn't say much, just nodded stiffly. I sat down. Ryan stood behind me, silent. Serena opened the meeting with a sigh. Serena said, look, I don't know what's gotten into you lately, but accusing my fiancé of stealing your lottery ticket, it's insane. Brandon grinned like he was already celebrating the verdict. Brandon said, honestly, this is just embarrassing for everyone, especially you. I didn't reply, I just looked at Ryan. He stepped forward, opened a small folder, and placed his phone gently on the table. Ryan said, before you continue, I'd like to play something. Brandon snorted. Brandon said, oh, what is this? A podcast? Ryan didn't respond. He pressed play. Brandon's voice came out of the speaker, shaky, defensive, clearly recorded during the fake lottery office call. Brandon's voice on recording. I already submitted the ticket. I have my deposit confirmation. Ryan's disguised voice replied, sir, we're not seeing any verified claim under your official identity. Brandon again. I went through someone I know. They said it would be cleaner. I didn't know it was a problem. The room froze. My mom blinked rapidly. My dad frowned and leaned in closer. Serena's arms dropped to her sides. Brandon's mouth opened slightly, then closed. Ryan pressed pause. Ryan said, would anyone like to explain? Brandon straightened up fast. Brandon said, that's edited. That's not even my voice. Ryan tilted his head slightly. Ryan said, it's time-stamped, geotagged, and cross-referenced with an IP log. I can produce the original call file, plus the metadata, if you'd like. Brandon's face darkened. Brandon said, this is entrapment. You faked an official call. Ryan said, it's not a court case, it's a conversation. And you confessed. I added quietly, you stole $12 million. Brandon stood up so fast the chair scraped across the floor. Brandon said, "You think you're smart? You think you can play some undercover game and humiliate me in front of her family?" Ryan didn't flinch. Brandon stepped forward, chest puffed. Brandon said, "Say that crap outside, tough guy. I'll show you who's smarter." Ryan calmly set the phone down. Ryan said, "Don't do this." Brandon lunged. What happened next didn't even look real. 1 second, Brandon was charging, fists raised. The next, Ryan had stepped aside, grabbed his wrist, and twisted him down in a smooth, practiced motion that ended with Brandon face first on the rug and Ryan's knee between his shoulder blades. Brandon groaned. Ryan said, "Are we done now?" Dead silence. My mother gasped. My father stood but didn't move forward. Serena. Serena just stared. For once she looked like a little girl who realized her favorite toy wasn't real. Ryan slowly stood, letting Brandon scramble up. His face was red, his hair messed up, his ego shredded beyond repair. Brandon muttered something under his breath, but no one caught it. Ryan said, "You stole her ticket. You lied about it. And now everyone knows." I stood. I looked at my family. I said, "You all thought I was unstable, crazy, bitter. But I was telling the truth the whole time." My dad said weakly, "I didn't know." I cut him off. I said, "No. You didn't want to know." Serena finally spoke, her voice small. Serena said, "He told me he didn't do it. I believed him." I looked at her. I said, "You didn't believe me." She blinked fast like she was fighting tears. Serena said, "You never let things go. You always twist things." I said, "I never twisted anything. I just finally stopped lying to myself about what you are." Brandon started to speak, but Ryan raised a hand. Ryan said, "Don't." The room stayed quiet. I turned to leave. Ryan followed. As I stepped into the hallway, I heard my mom say, "What do we do now?" And my dad said, "I think we just lost both daughters. That was the only thing he got right." They didn't apologize right away. No one does when they've convinced themselves you were the problem. After Brandon lunged at Ryan and was dropped like a sack of bricks in front of everyone, you'd think there would be silence. Then guilt. Then apologies. But no. There was just tension. Shifting eyes. The sound of pride trying to survive humiliation. We left without ceremony. It wasn't until the next day that my phone buzzed. My mother said, "We just want to talk. Things got out of hand. No one wanted it to come to this." I didn't reply. I wasn't being cruel. I just didn't owe them a response. Not anymore. That afternoon, my dad called. My father said, "You know your mother didn't sleep last night. She's worried about you." I said, "Funny." She wasn't worried when she thought I was insane. My father said, "Come on, it was a misunderstanding. We didn't have the full story." I said, "You didn't want the full story." He sighed. My father said, "You've always been a little reactive. We weren't sure what to believe." I said, "You believed him. That's what matters." And then I hung up. A few hours later, Serena texted. Serena said, "I didn't know he'd actually steal it." That's how she phrased it. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I was wrong." Just stunned surprise that the fiancé she had blindly defended turned out to be exactly what I said he was. I replied once. I said, "You didn't care. That's the part you still won't admit." She didn't text again. That night, Ryan and I sat on the back porch, listening to the wind move through the trees. He handed me a mug of tea and asked, "Feeling any different?" I said, "They're trying to pretend this was all some tragic misunderstanding." Ryan said, "That's easier than facing what they did." I nodded and stared out into the dark. I said, "They still want to control the narrative, to make it sound like I overreacted, but, oh well, mistakes happen." Ryan said, "You don't owe them your peace to protect their guilt." I didn't respond. I just took a sip. The messages kept coming over the next few days, from cousins, from aunts, even from my mother again. My mother said, "We want to move forward. I hope you'll let us." But not once did anyone say, "We were wrong." Not once did anyone say, "We chose the wrong side." And that silence said everything. They believed Brandon because they trusted Serena. They trusted Serena because she was always the golden one. And I was the moody one. The too much. The one they had all quietly agreed wasn't to be trusted when things got serious. Even after they were confronted with the truth, Brandon's own voice, the financial trail, the trap he walked into, they couldn't bring themselves to say, "We failed you." Because they had, not just now, but for years. They hadn't just doubted me, they discarded me. When I needed protection, they chose performance. When I needed belief, they chose silence. I wasn't angry anymore, just done. I didn't return Serena's call when she left a voicemail 2 days later. I didn't reply when my mother sent me a photo of the family dog and said, "He misses you." That was the oldest trick in the book, trying to open the door through sentiment instead of accountability. Ryan asked, "Are you sure you don't want to meet with them?" I said, "What's left to say?" He nodded and said, "Then that's your answer." It wasn't revenge I wanted, it was distance, permanent, peaceful distance, and for once in my life, I didn't need to explain myself to anyone. It didn't happen all at once. The peace, the healing, the quiet. It came slowly, like sunlight rising behind mountains. Soft at first, then undeniable. 3 months after the confrontation, I moved into a new house. Not a mansion, nothing flashy, just clean lines, warm wood, and a wraparound porch that felt like an exhale. I paid for it in full. No mortgage, no strings, no shared keys. Ryan carried the last box in and dropped it gently in the hallway. Ryan said, "Feels like it suits you. Strong foundation, solid view." I smiled and said, "It's the first place I've ever lived where no one's voice gets louder than mine." He nodded. Ryan said, "Then it's home." We didn't talk much about the money after that. Not because it was awkward, because it wasn't the point. I had set up a nonprofit in the background. Quietly, no press releases, no fancy ribbon cutting. Just a woman with a lot to give and the desire to finally give it on her terms. It focused on financial empowerment for women, especially those who'd been financially manipulated or silenced. The applications came fast, donations followed. So did letters. One day, Ryan brought in the mail and handed me a pink envelope. Ryan said, "This one looks like it was written with tears and coffee." I opened it. It was from a woman in Kansas who had finally left an abusive relationship because she'd read about one of our scholarship recipients. Her letter said, "You made me believe I wasn't crazy. That's all I needed." Thank you. I pressed the letter to my chest. Ryan watched me, steady as always. Ryan said, "I hope you know what you've built." I said, "Something that can't be stolen." And that was the truth. Brandon stole a ticket, but not the win. Not really. The win was every morning I woke up in my own house beside a man who never needed to be persuaded to believe in me. Ryan never treated me like a project, or a risk, or a mess. He listened. He acted. He stayed. He never asked what I did with the money, never asked for a cut, never made a single joke about upgrading. He just said once, Ryan said, "You were gold before the numbers hit. The rest is just noise." That man could disarm someone in under 10 seconds, but he could also hold silence like it was sacred. One night, we sat on the porch under a navy sky, and I asked him, "What do you think they say about me now?" Ryan said, "Does it matter?" I thought about it. About the group chat I hadn't checked in weeks. About the voicemails I never returned. About Serena. Because yes, Serena had tried again. 2 months after everything, she texted me. No flowery opener. Just, Serena said, "I'm sorry, I messed up. I really need to talk, please." A week later, Serena said, "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm in a bad place. Can we talk?" Then silence. She didn't know about the house, or the nonprofit, or the fact that I'd quietly redeemed the ticket and built something permanent from the ashes of her betrayal. She just knew she was alone. But I never replied. Not because I hated her, because I no longer needed anything from her. Not closure, not guilt, not some strained performance of reconciliation. She'd made her choice. So had I. I had Ryan. I had my peace. I had a purpose now that didn't shrink every time someone else walked into the room. No one in the family ever offered a full apology. Not really. They just faded. Some sent the occasional holiday message. Others liked my posts from a distance. No one dared ask for anything. And I liked it that way. I stopped trying to be the one who made things right. I wasn't the problem anymore. I was the proof that truth has legs, even if it walks slower than lies. Brandon? He disappeared, moved to another city from what I heard. Serena never married him. In the end, he got the one thing he deserved. Nothing. And me? I got everything. Not just the money, but the freedom, the clarity, the ability to look in the mirror and not second-guess the voice in my own head. I got Sunday mornings barefoot in the kitchen. I got letters from women I'll never meet who now believe they matter. I got laughter that didn't come with a price. And I got Ryan. I once told him that I wished I'd never told Serena about the ticket. But now, I'm glad I did. Because if I hadn't, I might still be looking for love and validation in the same broken places. Instead, I found it where it always waited. Right here, beside me. With the man who never needed convincing. With the peace that didn't ask me to perform. And with a truth I could finally say out loud. I didn't just win the lottery. I won the kind of love money can't buy.